Greetings, my fellow thin-blooded silent thinkers. The LT News Podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful Swampy Man in South Florida. And today's date is Saturday, May 4th, 2019. So let us begin. Oh, thank you for tuning in, folks. Another beautiful day in Fort Lauderdale. It's warm. The air show is supposed to be happening today and tomorrow. And I am at Collective Cafe Collective, exactly, 100 North Federal Highway, Suite C4, in the heart of downtown Fort Lauderdale, east of US 1, and the actual facility is at the corner of Broward Boulevard and Northeast 7th Avenue, the southern end of the Victoria Park District. Actually, it's part of the whole Collective Ventures, have offices and little rehearsal areas, and I gotta admit, it's a real cool vibe. And you just look up online at collectiveventures.org. Just look up cafe or cafe collective online. It's simple. You got Facebook and all that. And you got multiple areas in South Florida as well, and of course maybe other parts of the country. Yeah, so looks like there's gonna be some big rallies around the world for Julian Assange. The war is, of course, the war on the press. And I was listening to a show on Scott Horton when you have folks that were standing up on no more military intervention in Venezuela. And even it was really nicely done. I would go to popularresistance.org and you can look it up for yourself. And I'll be very fair. It doesn't mean I'll agree with everything on the site, but the information there is a lot of good stuff I have checked out. And I have to say, like, I'm a person like myself, regardless of government or Maduro in general, the people in Venezuela have to make that own decision. That's how I see things. These foreign entanglements is dangerous. And if the empire of the United States starts to be on a halt, so be it. I was against this from the very beginning. The Monroe Doctrine should have been condemned almost 100 years ago. That's how you gotta look at the world, and even the founding fathers were against that, especially President George Washington, because he knows about war and foreign alliance entanglements firsthand, and you have to respect that. I'm just a little bit mellowed right now, so I'm not going to be talking about stuff that's going on in Venezuela. And it's interesting, I'll just make this one more point, and I know I might be digressing. Like everyone talking about Venezuela, you should look at the stuff, the conflicts are happening in West Africa. Oh, but no one talks, they don't really hear that in the mainstream news in the United States. I wonder why. And it's disappointing that the Congress didn't have enough to override the veto on the war in Yemen, supplying the Saudis weapons. That's disturbing too. So you got a bunch of cockroaches in there as well. Wants imperialism. So think about that. It's not just, all those Trump haters out there. You better look at the people you support, because they're not all rosary, I would say. Alright, so enough of that. I'm going to be talking a few things here. And naturally, this one came from the American Free Press. I'll probably do a couple of read a couple of articles on here for the future time. And this is actually a membership, this right here is a membership art newspaper, so I'll put the link up, but I really recommend folks go be a member, because these guys are very good at what they do. And Yeah, I'm going to do a couple here. Do an editor's view on what's going on. Alright, this one here says is entitled Globalist Lie Low. Has Europe become too hot for elite Bilderberg meeting? Interesting. This is from Mark Anderson. And I'm going to try to size this up if I can. Yeah, there you go. It says that Europe has become too hospitable for Bilderberg, at least for the time being, according to Tony Gosling, a former colleague of AFP. Bilderberg hound Jim Tucker, who worked with Tucker for several years, exposing Bilderberg. Gosling, an investigative journalist for Bristol, UK, points that Eurosceptics who oppose the Eurozone and the European Union itself, the very creation of which was nurtured by Bilderberg, said that candidates and politicians who want the national sovereignty of their nations restored are making headway getting into political office. This includes Germany. As a result, news of a Bilderberg meeting in Europe at a time of such strong anti-globalist sentiment and developments could prove damaging for the group, especially in terms of bringing back unwanted widespread publicity about the secretive gathering, something the group has labored to control and reduce as much as possible in its more than 6 decades of existence. They could cause a lot of trouble for themselves, meaning in Europe, Gosling said, as Bilderberg prepares for the 67th meeting in 65 years. They could end up on a lot of front pages, which they don't want. The kind of publicity was seen last year when Italian populist politicos, Five Star Movement, and other parties made noise against Bilderberg's meeting in Turin, Italy. While the coverage was not deafening to Bilderberg, a transitional planning and networking outfit that brings together the best, the brightest, and the wealthiest carefully selected fields in the private and public sectors. Any sustained or meaningful coverage that don't dismiss Bilderberg's opponents is darkly frowned upon. The UK Daily Mail newspaper did manage to briefly infiltrate the 2018 Bilderberg meeting in Italy, while the infiltration was limited and the resulting article was not up to AFP's or Gosling's standards. The development was another pushback against Bilderberg's secrecy in Europe. The cradle of its birth in 1954 via Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, an obscure European movement organizer Joseph Ratzinger. CIA money helped fund the first Bilderberg meeting in the Netherlands at the Hotel de Bilderberg, hence the group's name. Ain't that nice? The American taxpayer dollars are at work. The tyrannical way, imperialism is patriotic, the tyrannical way. Thank you, CIA. Without you, we would still be a lot more freer. Alright, I'll continue on here. I like to use sarcasm now and then. Since Europe may prove too hot for Bilderberg for now, and Bilderberg met too recently, 2011, in the U.S., to return to the States where they meet this year. The strong belief is Canada will host a next gathering. The Bilderbergers last met in their 2006 at the Brookings Street Hotel in the national capital of Ottawa. A return there appeared possible at press time, since Bilderberg rather frequently returns to past ventures. The group has met at the Westfield Marriott in Chantilly, Virginia, several times, including 2008, 2012, and 2017. Another August hotel in Ottawa where the group could conceivably meet is the Hotel Fairmont Chateau, L'Oreal, where even the cheapest rooms book for more than $600 per night. It's always a guessing game, said Gosling, who warmly remembers working with Tucker, something this writer did 3 times in 2010 through 2012. The group always puts a lot of bum steer to mislead the Bilderberg watchers. Author Daniel Esterlin, another longtime Bilderberg watcher, who in 2017 released a movie about Bilderberg, told AFP that he did not know where the group will meet in 2019. indicating perhaps that the Bilderbergers are trying to put the proverbial publicity genie back in the bottle and avoid hostile environments whenever possible. Well, it's very interesting there. So you always gotta see these parasites are being exposed. And there was even a claim that with John Hickenlooper, Governor John Hickenlooper, went to one of the Bilderberg meetings. They're gonna say, we're gonna groom you to be president of the United States. It looks like that or possibly Joe Biden. So we all know that Joe Biden's not more than a New World Order stooge pigeon himself. This is very interesting. So one thing I like, they're being exposed. They're almost like wearing no clothes, to be exact. It's going to really put the pressure on these individuals. And they're just part of the PR team for the One World Order, to be exact. They're not the main entree, okay, if you understand what I'm saying. That's one of the things you have to really look at. And one thing I'm happy about, the word is getting out. And Mr. Tucker is probably in the journalist spirit world. Jim Tucker just throwing those grenades in there, monkey wrenches at him. So, but hey, hopefully just keep you posted on this. If American Free Press has anything, I'll just make sure to bring it to you guys. All right, and we're gonna see another article here. Is says here a personal message from editor. Yes, America, there's really a border emergency. Is there a crisis, national emergency on the U.S. border with Mexico? Many Democrats and far-left activists who want to throw the country's borders say no. More reasonable people disagree. So what's the truth? Is the country really facing an invasion from the South? Or are demagogues just inflaming American fear to harvest votes? In this week's edition, we look at depth in the issue, going so far to have our roving editor Mark Anderson to visit the border in southern Texas and report on this location. While touring the Rio Grande Valley, Mark had an opportunity to sit on a press conference given by acting Rio Grande Valley Sector Border Patrol Chief Hector Escamilla. And how did it stop the border official character situation? No surprise there. It is a crisis. Escamilla elaborated on this, noting that the past 6 months his agents have apprehended nearly 200,000 illegal immigrants in his sector alone, which consists of 300 miles of river, more than 300 coastal miles, and more than 30 countries. They are not just Mexicans or Central Americans, he added. They're pouring in from Asia and the Middle East in pretty large numbers as well. Escamilla's comments to us mirror what we have been seeing at the national level. U.S. Customs Border Protection, CBP, the federal agency responsible for policing America's borders, announced that in March alone, the Border Patrol detained over 103,000 immigrants trying to illegally cross the border, most for 1 month and over a decade. Homeland Security Secretary Kevin McGillen told a congressional hearing. On April 28th, in a classic Trump fashion, the president, in an interview with Fox News, didn't emphasize the situation, telling the news host, it's like Disneyland now. Before, you could get separated, and some people would say, let's not go up. Now, you don't get separated. And while that sounds nice and all, what happens is you have 10 times as many people coming up because they know they're not going to be separated from their children. So it turned out to be a disincentive, which is obviously a disaster. He added, it's a system that Congress can fix, but they don't get off. They don't get off their expletive delete. The Democrats could solve it so quickly because we're going to have all the infrastructure soon. By the end of next year, most of the wall is going to be up. Trump concluded his interview by saying that if Congress fixed the laws, the crisis would be over. Border Security is apprehending 100,000 people a month. He said, we will be able to kick them right out. We can't. We have to bring them into a court. Who ever heard of that? How bad things are on the border? 2 days before American Free Press went to press, CBP announced that its agents had captured the largest group of immigrants who ever illegally crossed into the United States. On April 30th, CBP tweeted, hashtag Border Patrol agents apprehend the largest group of 424 illegal aliens just after midnight this morning in Sunland Park, New Mexico. A second group of 230 illegal aliens was also apprehended in Antelope Grove, New Mexico this morning. In the Rio Grande Valley area, which are edited toward, CBP characterized a number of illegal aliens they caught as unprecedented. On average, the Border Patrol agents in the Rio Grande Valley arrested more than 1,100 people per day, CBP reported in a press release on April 23rd. Meanwhile, the mainstream media continues to poo-poo the situation. On April 8th, PBS, which is funded in part by the U.S. taxpayers, reported a closer look at the numbers raises questions on whether these issues, drugs, terrorism, and illegal immigration, are getting worse and whether they constitute a crisis. Earlier this year, the Washington Post fact-checked Trump's call for dealing with the crisis on the border, claiming that there's no data to back up the president's claim. Those few media outlets that do concede that there's a humanitarian crisis only to do so because they want to blame it all on Trump, forgetting that the chief executive is only tasked with enforcing the laws as Congress is responsible for passing them. The evidence is there. The country is facing the crisis on our border, and while immigration is a benefit for the country, the unchecked, massive, illegal wave that's battering the nation does no one any favors. Not average Americans, and certainly not immigrants themselves who risk their lives to illegally come to the United States. That was the editor by Christopher J. Petherick. And there's one thing about the American Free Press, because they're America's last real newspaper, they're populist independent, not Republican or Democrat. So and that, of course, other people, they call them racist and white supremacists and all, which is totally irrelevant. It's just more garbage you want to try to throw in people's faces. And like I said, I like to read this now and then. And one of the things you have to see is like what's going on with this illegal immigration is basically, it's becoming part of the Club of Rome. So, and that's one of the areas you have to really pay attention to. And that's how it really just drives me crazy here. But let me see, I'm going to try to do a couple more here on these areas. This one here comes to American Free Press. Gutsy attorney brings up to date on unique lawsuit against SPLC, which is Southern Poverty Law Centers. Glenn Allen, these are dark times for freedom-loving people across the Western world. This is especially true if their values tend toward natural unity, suspicion of intrusive government, and revulsion toward fake news and media orchestrated smear campaigns. When the night is dark, we must navigate by the stars. Each of you who has donated to my lawsuit against the Southern Poverty Law Center is a star. I'm sincerely grateful for your support. My lawsuit has proceeded very much as I anticipated. I was certain that SPLC would file a motion to dismiss my claims, and that is what it has done. I was prepared for it and have opposed it vigorously. The briefing on that motion is now complete, and we await the court's decision. If the motion to dismiss is denied, even in the part, my case will proceed to discovery, i.e., document requests and depositions, which should be extremely interesting given the recent scandals at the SPLC. If the motion is granted, I will appeal to the Fourth Circuit. Either way, I will need your continued financial support to stay in the ring against the SPLC, which has become a blight on freedom in our country. Please stay with me in this fight, contributing to the Free Expression Foundation, which is dedicated to helping persons such as myself, as many persons in similar situations. EFE is tax-exempt 501c3 nonprofit organization, and thus your donation is tax-deductible to the extent of the law. Please know that I am in this contest not only for myself, but to vindictive fundamental principle of free expression, and must protect us all. And not merely this generation, but generations. let's not lose sight on the truth, ancient truth, and I mean that while fight to preserve the freedom is hard, the fight to regain the freedom once it's been lost is even harder. Again, I thank you for your support, for your continued financial support. Please use the form on the back page of 32 of the issue of American Free Press. Just I would recommend folks just look up Free Expression Foundation and look up Glenn Allen, which is GLENALLEN. All right, so I'll just here page 32. Many legal experts tell me I may have think is the best chance to win any lawsuit that has been filed against the SPLC. Thus far, I sure hope so. They try their best to ruin me, and I'm just returning the favor. That is awesome. I love this stuff. So, I might just do one more here in this article. Oh, yeah. I know where to look at. Okay, baby. Ooh. One moment. Ooh. There's little articles there for. Ooh. Yeah, I've this one here came from John Whitehead. I'll probably do a couple things on him. So, it's mainly particularly to child trafficking. Disgusting truth about America. Shocker. An estimated 100,000 children are brought and sold in the U.S. every year. So John Whitehead has to say here. Young girls as young as 9 years old are being bought and sold for sex in America. The average sex for a young woman being sold for sex is now 13 years old. This is I think I read this already. Let me see. I'm going to continue on. Why not? I'm going to continue on here. I may have read on my past episodes. If so, if you have heard me before, I do apologize. If not, first timers, let's check it out. And I will continue on here. Sex trafficking, especially when it comes to buying and selling young girls, has become a big business in America. The fastest growing business is organized crime and the second most lucrative commodity traded illegally after drugs and guns. The investigative journalist Amy Fine Collins notes it has become more lucrative and much safer to sell malleable teens and drugs or guns. A pound of heroin or an AK-47 can be retailed once, but a young girl can be sold 10 to 15 times a day, and a righteous pimp confiscates 100% of her earnings. Who buys a child for sex? Otherwise ordinary men from all walks of life. They could be your co-worker, doctor, pastor, or spouse. Writer, journalist Tim Swarens, who spent more than a year investigating the sex trade in America. In Georgia alone is an estimate 7,200 men, half of them in their 30s, seek to purchase sex with adolescent girls each month, averaging roughly at 300 a day. It is an estimate that at least 100,000 children, girls, and boys are bought and sold for sex in the U.S. every year, with as many as 300,000 children in danger of being trafficked each year. Some of these children are forcibly abducted, others are runaways, and still others are sold in the system by relatives and acquaintances. This is not a problem found only in big cities. It's happening everywhere, right under our noses, in suburbs, cities, and towns across the nation. As Ernie Allen, a former president of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, points out, the only way not to find this in America, in any American city, is simply not to look for it. Every year, girls being bought and sold are getting younger and younger too. The average age of those being trafficked is 13. Yet, it has, as the head of group that combats trafficking pointed out, let's think about what average means. This means there are children younger than 13. That means 8, 9, 10 years old. Where did this little appetite for young girls come from? Look around you. Young girls have been sexualized for years, now in music videos, on billboards, in television ads, and in clothing stores. Marketers have created a demand for young flesh and a ready supply of over-sexualized children. Can we see mind control 101, my friends? All it takes is one look at social media photos of teens to see examples. If they are imitating porn they've actually seen, they are imitating the porn-inspired images and poses they absorb everywhere, writes Jessica Bennett for Newsweek. Latex corsets and stripper heels, once the fashion of porn stars, have made their way into middle and high school. This is what Bennett refers as a personification of a generation, or in other words, culture is grooming these young people to be preyed upon by sexual predators. And yet, then we wonder why our young women are being preyed on, trafficked, and abused. Some on social media makes it all too easy. As one news center reported, finding girls is easy for pimps. They look on Facebook and other social networks. Then they and their assistants cruise malls, high schools, and middle schools. They pick them up at bus stops, on the trolley. Girl-to-girl recruitment sometimes happens. Foster homes and youth shelters have become prime targets for traffickers. This is why, my friends, these social media sites never get too personal. I even tell this to a lot of young people out there, even in their 20s and 30s, okay? Get too personal. This is really disturbing, okay? And I will continue on here. Rarely do these girls enter into prostitution voluntarily. Many start out as runaways or throwaways, only be snatched up by pimps or larger sex rings. Others persuade to meet up with a stranger after interacting online through one of the many social media networking sites. Find themselves quickly initiated into their new lives as sex slaves. Debbie, a student who belonged to a close-knit Air Force family living in Phoenix, Arizona, is an example of this trade in the flesh. Debbie was 15 when she was snatched from her driveway by a friend. Forced into a car, Debbie was bound and taken to an unknown location, held at gunpoint, and raped by multiple men. She was then crammed into a small dog kennel and forced to eat dog biscuits. Debbie's captors advertised her services on Craigslist. Men who responded were often married with children, and money that Debbie earned for sex was given to her kidnappers. The gang raping continued. After searching the apartment where Debbie was held captive, police finally found Debbie stuffed in a drawer under a bed. Her harrowing ordeal lasted for 40 days. She was very fortunate, of course. While Debbie was fortunate enough to be rescued, others are not so lucky. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, nearly 800,000 children go missing every year, or roughly 2,185 children a day. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents at a cybercrime center in Fairfax, Virginia, reported that when it comes to sex, the appetites of many Americans have now changed. What was once considered abnormal is now the norm. These agents are tracking a clear spike in demand of hardcore pornography on the internet. As one agent noted, we have become desensitized by the soft stuff. Now we need harder and harder hit. Journalist David McSwain recount in a chilling piece for the Sarasota Herald Tribune in Oakland Park, an industrial Fort Lauderdale suburb. Federal agents in 2011 encountered a brothel operated by a married couple inside the Boom Boom Room, as it was known. Customers paid a fee and were given a condom and a timer, left alone with one of the brothel's 8 teenagers. Children as young as 13. 16-year-old foster child testified that he acted as security while a 17-year-old girl told a federal judge she was forced to have sex with as many as 20 men a night. And Oakland Park is not far from Fort Lauderdale. It's like up the road, to be exact, okay? And I believe I know exactly where this is at, this warehouse district, industrial district of in Oakland Park. One particular sex trafficking ring catered specifically to migrant workers employed seasonally on farms throughout the southern southeastern states, especially the Carolinas and Georgia. Although it's a flourishing business in every state in the country, traffickers transport the women from farm to farm where migrant workers would line up outside shacks, as many as 30 at a time, to have sex with them before they were transported to another farm where the process would begin all over again. So what can you do? Educate yourselves and your children about the growing menace in our community. Stop feeding the monster. Sex trafficking is a part of a larger continuum in America that runs the gamut for homelessness, poverty, and self-esteem issues. The sexualized television glorified as a pimp and hoe culture. What is often referred as a pornification of America, a billion-dollar sex industry built on the back of pornography, music, and entertainment. Call on your city councils, elected officials, and police departments to make the battle against sex trafficking a top priority. No more so even than the so-called war on terror and drugs and the militarization of law enforcement. That so many women and children continue to be victimized, brutalized, and treated like human cargo is due to three things. One, a consumer demand that is increasingly lucrative for everyone involved, except the victim. Two, a level of corruption so invasive on both local and international scale that there is little hope of working through establishment channels for change. And three, an eerie silence from individuals who fail to speak out against such atrocities. If I'm correct, this is on the Rutherford Institute's website as well. So I am going to be I will be, going to be like looking more into this, reading more on these articles, but it's very intriguing indeed, and disturbing to be exact. And that's why I think I tell folks, always got to look at the bigger picture and what's been happening. But one thing for sure is a big issue. Like I said before, even Donald Trump signed an executive order to really execute it more thoroughly. And things are happening. But it's a big battle. We got to counter these scumbags that they are. I remember watching this movie called Kinjite with the late Charles Bronson. It was mainly about human sex trafficking. Yeah, we have a chance. Check out that movie. Pretty realistic to an extent, based on the article. So, and the ending was very nice, and I'll leave it at that. All right. This one here, we're going to continue. It came out April 30th. This is commentary by John Whitehead again. Predator cops guilty of sex crimes against women and children are in Menace society. Sexual predation by police officers happen more often than people in the business are willing to admit. Former Seattle Police Chief Norm Stamper. How this could happen right under our noses. That's what readers want to know. After my column went viral, were the extent to which young children are being sold for sex in America. Where are the police when these children, some as young as 9 years old, are being raped repeatedly? For that matter, what is the Trump administration doing about the fact that adult purchases children for sex at least 2.5 million times a year in suburbs, cities, towns across the nation? I'll tell you what government is doing: little to nothing. While American children are being menaced by sexual predators, the Trump administration and its congressional cohorts continue to wage endless wars, run up the national debt, and distract the populace with virtual and kabuki political theater. Police are not much better. Too many instances, the cops are worse. Indeed, while there are certainly many good cops in this country, and I've had the honor of working with a number of them. Bad cops have become symptomatic of a criminal justice system that is deeply rotten through and through. We can no longer count on police to save us from the worst in our society. In many cases, rather than being part of the solution, America's police forces, riddled with corruption, brutality, sexual misconduct, and drug abuse, have largely become part of the problem. As Philadelphia Inquirer reports, hundreds of police officers across the country have turned from protectors to predators, using the power of their badge to extort sex. Let's start with sex trafficking. In a number of cases, victims of sex trafficking report that police are among those buying young girls and women for sex. In other words, as a recent study by State Commission on the Status of Women in Arizona State University makes clear, victims are being exploited by the very people who are supposed to protect them, police officers. In New York, 7 NYPDs, 3 sergeants, 2 detectives, and 2 officers were accused of running brothels that sold 15-minute sexual encounters, ranking in more than $2 million over the course of 13 months. 2 of the cops' brothers were charged with holding a bachelor party at one of the brothels where they got the place for nothing, and they used the prostitutes. In California, a police sergeant, a 16-year veteran of the police force, was arrested for raping a 16-year-old girl who was being held captive and sold for sex in the home in an upscale neighborhood. A week-long sitting in Florida ended with 277 arrests of individuals accused of sex trafficking, including doctors, pharmacists, and police officers. A sex trafficking ring in Hawaii described cops asking for sexual favors to more coercive situations, like let's let you go if you do X, Y, or Z for me. One study found that over 14% of sex workers say they have been threatened with arrest unless they had sex with a police officer. In many states, it's actually legal for police to have sex with prostitutes during the course of sting operations. While the police of cops engaged in sex trafficking is part of the American people, states' seedy underbelly that doesn't get addressed enough. Equally alarming, the number of cops who committed sex crimes against those they've encountered as part of their job duties, a largely underreported number, given the blue wall of silence that shields police misconduct. Oh my goodness, like you got a bunch of, reminds me to an extent about the whole drug sting operations. There's people I knew who were informants, how to do cocaine, and many of them, one person I know, including others, they lost their marriages over it. Former Seattle police chief Norm Stamper describes cases in which cops fondled prisoners, made traffic stops of attractive women, traded sexual favors for freedom, had sex with teenagers, and raped children. Young girls are particularly vulnerable to these predators in blue. Former police officer Phil Stitton estimates that half of the victims of police sex crimes are minors under the age of 18. According to the Washington Post, a national study found that 40% of reported cases of police sexual misconduct in teens, one young woman was assaulted during a ride along with an officer who said in a taped confession, "The badge gets you the PY, and the PY gets you the badge, you know?" For example, Pennsylvania police chief and his friend were arrested for allegedly raping a young girl hundreds of times, orally, vaginally, and anally several times a week, over the course of 7 years, starting when she was 4 years old. In 2017, 2 NYPD cops were accused of arresting a teenager, handcuffing her, and driving her in an unmarked van to a nearby parking lot, where they raped and forced her to perform oral sex on them, then dropped her off on a nearby street corner. The New York Times reports that a sheriff's deputy in San Antonio was charged with sexually assaulting the 4-year-old daughter of an undocumented Guatemalan woman, and threatened to have her deported if she reported the abuse. One young girl, J.E., was kidnapped by a Border Patrol agent when she was 14 years old, taken to his apartment and raped. In the apartment, there were 2 beds on top of the other, children's bunk beds, and ropes there too. There were shoelaces for my wrist and my feet. My mind was blank, recalls J.E. was trying to understand everything. I didn't know what to do. My feet were tied up. I would look at him, and he had a gun, and that frightened me. And I asked him why. He answered me that he was doing this to me because I was the prettiest one of the three. Two teenage girls accuse a Customs and Borders Protection officer of forcing the strip, fouling them, and then trying to get them to stop crying by offering chocolate, potato chips, and a blanket. The government settled a case for $125,000. Mind you, this is the same government that has been separating immigrant children from their parents and locking them in detention centers where they're easy prey for sexual predators. So far, the government has received more than 500 complaints about sexual abuse at those detention facilities. It is also the same government that lost almost 1,500 migrant children. Who knows how many of those children ended up in the hands of traffickers. The police-state sexual assault of children are sickening enough, but when you add sex crimes against grown women into the mix, the picture becomes even more sordid. According to the Washington Post, research of police sexual misconduct, a term to describe actions from a sexual harassment and extortion or forcible rape by officers, overwhelmingly concludes that it is a systematic problem. Investigative journalist Andrea Ritchie has tracked national patterns of sexual violence by police officers during traffic stops, in addition to heightening the risk for minor offenses, drug arrests, and police interactions with teenagers, victims of domestic abuse, women of color, transgender women, women who use drugs or alcohol, and women who are involved in the sex trade are particularly vulnerable to sexual assault by police. One Oklahoma City officer allegedly sexually assaulted at least 7 women while on duty over the course of 4 months, including the 57-year-old grandmother who says she was forced to give the cop oral sex after he pulled her over. A Philadelphia state trooper eventually convicted of assaulting 6 women and teenagers once visited the hospital bedside of a pregnant woman who attempted suicide and groped her breast and masturbated. These aren't isolated incidents. According to the research from Bowling Green State University, police officers in the U.S. were charged for more than 400 rapes over a 9-year period. During that same time period, 600 police officers were arrested for forcible fondling, 229 were charged with forcible sodomy, 186 were arrested for statutory rape, 58 for sexual assault with an object, and 98 with indecent exposure. Sexual assault is believed to be the second most reported form of misconduct against police officers after the use of excessive force, making up more than 9% of all complaints. Even so, these crimes are believed to be largely underreported, so much that sex crimes may in fact be the number one form of misconduct among police officers. So why are the numbers underreported? The women are terrified. Who are they going to call? It's the police who are abusing them, said Penny Harrington, a former police chief of Portland, Oregon. One Philadelphia cop threatened to arrest a teenager for carjacking unless she had sex with him. He had all the power. I had no choice, testified the girl. Who was I? He has his badge. It gets really... When I hear stuff like this, folks, it really is a hot button. When you got governmental delegates think they're better than everybody else, they're nothing more than pieces of trash, as far as I'm concerned, with this form of conduct. I will continue on here. There's the dangers of a police state that invests its henchmen with so much power that they don't even need to use handcuffs or a gun to get what they want. Making matters worse, most police departments do little to identify the offenders, even less to stop them. Unlike other types of police misconduct, the abuse of police power to coerce sex is little addressed in training and rarely tracked by a police disciplinary system. Conclude Nancy Phillips and Craig R. McCoy, writing for the Philadelphia Inquirer. This official neglect makes it easy for predators to escape punishment and find new victims. Unfortunately, this is a problem that is hiding in plain sight, covered up by government agencies that are failing in their constitutional duties to serve and protect we the people. The thin blue line of knee-jerk adulation and absolute loyalty to police, above and beyond what the law requires, a line frequently pushed by President Trump, is creating a men's society that cannot be ignored. Richard Nixon is the same thing. I'm pro-law enforcement. We are a pro-law enforcement nation. An investigative report into police misconduct illustrates a pervasive of the problem when police go rogue. According to USA Today, at least 85,000 law enforcement officers across the USA have been investigated or disciplined for misconduct over the past decade. Officers have beaten members of the public, planted evidence, and used their badges to harass women. They have lied, stolen, dealt drugs, driven drunk, and abused their spouse. Despite their role as public servants, the men and women who swear an oath to keep the community safe can generally avoid public scrutiny for their misdeeds. The records for their misconduct are filed away, rarely be seen by anyone outside the department. Police unions and the political allies have worked to put special protections in place, ensuring some records are shielded from public view or even destroyed. Obtained from thousands of state agencies, prosecutors, police departments, and sheriffs, the records detail at least 200,000 instances of alleged misconduct, much of it previously unreported. They included 22,924 investigations of officers using excessive force, 3,145 allegations of rape, child molestation, and other sexual misconduct, and 2,307 cases of domestic violence by officers. As a researcher, Jonathan Blanks notes, the system is rigged to protect officers from outside accountability. The worst cops are going to get the most protection. Hyped up on the power of the badge and the weaponry, protected from charges of wrongdoing by police unions and government agencies, and empowered rapidly advancing tools, technological and otherwise, that make it all easy to identify, track, and take advantage of vulnerable members of society. Priors in the nation, police forces are growing in numbers. It can start with a police officer punching a woman's license plate into a police computer, not to see whether the car is stolen, but to check out her picture, warns investigative journalist Nancy Phillips, Craig R. McCoy. If they are not caught or left unpunished, the abusers tend to keep going and get worse, experts say. So where does this leave us? The court, by allowing the government's desire for unregulated, unaccountable, expansive power to trump justice and to the rule of law, have turned away from this menace. Politicians eager for the support of the powerful police unions have turned away from this menace. Religious leaders who should know better but instead have silenced their moral conscience in order to cozy up to political power have turned away from this menace. Distracted by political theater, divided by politics, disenfranchised by a legislative and judicial system that renders us powerless in the face of a police state's many abuses, we the people have also turned a blind eye to this menace. We must stop turning away from this menace in our midst. For starters, police should not be expected or allowed to police themselves. Misconduct by local police has become a national problem. Therefore, the response to this national problem must start at the local level. There is no longer a matter of a few bad apples. The entire system has been corrupt and must be reformed. Greater oversight is needed, yes, but also greater accountability and more significant consequences for assaults. Andrea Ritchie's piece in the Washington Post provides some practical suggestions for reform, ranging from small steps to structural changes, greater surveillance of police movements, heightened scrutiny of police interactions and traffic stops, and more civilian oversight boards. But as she acknowledges, these efforts still don't strike at the root of the problem, a criminal justice system that protects abusers and encourages abuse. It is difficult to say whether the modern-day policing, within its deep-seated corruption, immunity from accountability, and authoritarian approach to law enforcement, attract this kind of deviant behavior or cultivates it. But empowering police to view themselves as the best or even only the solution to the public's problem while failing to hold them accountable for misconduct will only deepen the policing crisis that grows deadlier and more menacing by the day. So, I'll say, folks, it is a start. Got to do things by steps. The truth of the matter is, too, my friends, technically, the police are not obligated to protect an individual. So why give them the authority on harassing you? A lot of people have been using technology, dash cams, cell phones, video cameras. So small. They have them, you should use them too. There's not a damn thing they can do. Be the press. We can all be reporters. Put this word out to everybody. Let them know. Without us, you're nothing. Tax revolts. They can get them where it hurts. I'm not saying it's easy. I'll be realistic. But why be a number? Those are the areas you gotta observe as well. And even the honorable people in this institution need to be whistleblowers. Call out these sons of bitches. You are in the first line of defense, folks, not them. And people like this need to be, if in due process, strip all their benefits, donate it, get them where it hurts. Things are happening. Like I'll talk about Raja and Noor, two officers in Palm Beach and also in Minnesota, manslaughter. Things are happening in due time. We gotta accelerate a little bit more. They call us terrorists. They're trained, mind controlled. Program like we're the bad guys, we're the wicked people. I recommend folks to check out this book, Arrest Proof Yourself by Dale Carson. Go to archive.org and check it out yourself, and not go to the library. Very good man to know or to read his work. So that's how you have to see things, my friends. All right, what we got here? Oh wow, we got one more. Came from American Free Press once again. It says here, lack of pact with Mexico means heavy asylum request for U.S. Mark Anderson. There are unsubstantiated claims that Central Americans, especially those from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, are subject to prosecution, assault, murder, etc. in such a consistent manner that they have no choice but to uproot to flee their home countries in droves. Yet, rather than obtaining sanctuary in Mexico in order to remain close enough to home to return, that should need to rise, they instead risk their lives and the lives of their children crossing some 1,900 miles of often forbidden Mexican territory to enter the United States. So why don't they seek asylum in Mexico if they need immediate relief from prosecution, and if they're seeking asylum in the United States? What happened to the Hague Convention and Protocol, which was long required that refugees leave presumably violent, torn home country must seek asylum in the first non-hostile country that they enter? Dan Cadman of the Center for Immigration Studies, a Washington-based think tank, shared his views on the matter. The problem are multiple, but the answer is yes. The International Hague Convention and Protocol still requires people seeking safe havens to ask for asylum in the first country in which they can reasonably do so, he informed this writer. However, legalistic, meddling, and liberal interpretation of the convention have made the rules pliable. The way of the convention that has been codified into law by Congress used slightly different wording as lawyers and legalists argue. Levies an expectation on the U.S. to entertain the request for asylum, he said. That the way the convention has been codified into U.S. law by Congress used slightly different wording, which lawyers and legalists argued, and I think I already said that. Sorry about that. He went on to explain that the key to solving the problem is for the United States to enter into a bilateral agreement with Mexico to require American southern neighbors to honor its obligation under the convention in the matter that Canada does. Despite the fact that Mexico is also a signatory to the convention and protocol, we have no bilateral agreement with Mexico, as we do with Canada, to make them live up to their obligations, Cadman continued. Thus, the core of the problem is the absence of such pact with Mexico, which is aggravated by liberal courts and activist lawyers gaming the system. There are a lot of progressive activists in the country these days, including bench on the bench. That is an interpretation that they chose to focus on. Cabinet summarized referring to the expectation that the U.S. is overly generous welfare system serving as a beacon is a place to which asylum seekers must travel. So the whole thing is what they're saying is it's a hot potato game. Like, hey, we'll give it to these guys. If Mexico has this Pact agreement, treaty has to be honored. I say this, work with them. The United States have it with Canada. It's a treaty, right? Mexico should do the same thing. We all know, too, that nation has illegal immigration problems as well. Live up to your claims. Honor the treaty. It should be. I know there's stuff in the Constitution. What's interesting about the United States, the states should do immigration, and naturalization should be done by Congress. That's in the Constitution, so I can go on about that. I'm going to do that another day on immigration, how immigration got naturalized in the United States. I'm going to have to look into that. So in due time, I'll do that, and so I'll present it to you, all right? But, hey, Mexico's got to honor their agreement with the Pact. So work together, screw the differences, make things better for everybody. And no more Monroe Doctrine, no imperialism as well from the United States. So sometimes that's a big issue as well, with bad foreign policies in those areas. And that is it. I thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share us on social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or if you said something interesting I want to check out, whatever you do, please send your correspondence to Decorum. Plus, I'll be leaving all my footnotes on including my social media sites and email addresses, a couple of email addresses to my Spreaker page. Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that the demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading the love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.